before we get started, I'm just going to run a video which tells you a little bit more about the Digital Tourism Think Tank and what we do, and then I'm going to introduce today's wonderful panel who are going to be talking to you about their vision on the visitor cycle.
The Launchpad is an incredible resource built exclusively for DMOs. Inside the Launchpad, you'll get access to talks, reports, templates, case studies, best practices, and even community aspects which help you make your DMO incredible. Find out the latest best practices from world-leading DMOs. Deep dive into case studies giving you a full 360 view on the most impressive DMOs. Browse our selection of talks and keynotes from our flagship events, and connect with other DMOs for our monthly circles, which brings you together on some of the hottest topics. Deep dive into the many reports and surveys which show you how to transform your DMO, or go that one step further with templates which help you actually make those changes yourself. Let us guide you through the 12 stages of transformation in our new e-learning course. Everything can be found at thinkdigital.travel/launchpad. So what are you waiting for? Get in touch and become a member today.
Okay, well, that's a little introduction to some of the things we do. You're all very welcome here. My name is Nick Hall, and I'm going to be moderating today's session, which is all about the digital visitor cycle reimagined. And we're looking forward to the next years and to see how our panel see the digital visitor cycle shaping up themselves. So I'm very pleased to introduce our panel. Well, first of all, you have myself there. I will also be sharing a vision on the destination perspective. Then we've had a funny discussion about this earlier. I am going to pronounce her name wrong, but Eva there we go, nearly got that right. Industry Manager, Travel MENA at Google. And we also have Ernesto Sanchez-Beaumont, who is Director of Middle East and Africa Partner Markets Retail Commercial Operations at Amadeus. Quite a handful to start with. So thank you very much to our wonderful panel for joining us. This is a really distinguished panel, and they're going to share some great insights. They have fantastic data themselves, and they're going to be dipping into that data and telling you a bit more about how they're seeing things. But I want to get started by involving our audience, because I know that these trade shows can sometimes be a little bit, make you a little bit lethargic. So I want you to feel energized from the start of today's session. And then at the very end, I will be bringing you guys back into the conversation. But let's start off with having a look at what do you guys see as the biggest trend happening today in our industry? What are the sort of trends that you're facing or that you're finding challenges? Let me just have a show of hands. Who wants to start off with one trend that you see as a big trend right now? Don't be shy. So I'm going to hand over, first of all, to you, Eva. What is the biggest trend that you're seeing right now at Google?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I know that there are so many interesting things to do here, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be on this panel. I would say the one overarching theme that we're seeing is what I like to call a complexity-simplicity paradox, and let me explain what I mean by that. I think on the one hand, it has never been easier for people to book travel, to research travel, to reach out to other travelers for advice. At the same time, that wealth of options and information tends to make people very demanding and a bit anxious about the choices that they're making. Am I making the right decision? Could I be buying this cheaper somewhere else? Is there anything else that I need to explore? I will talk about this in more detail during my presentation, but at Google, we've analyzed a lot of customer journeys. And one thing that we noticed, even with journeys that are meant to be straightforward, where people know exactly where they're going, is that it can take over 300 digital interactions before they actually book, which I think tells you that they really want to be sure that they're making the right decision. I think the same principle applies to travel companies. On the one hand, travel businesses have never had more data and more technology available to them to make their businesses better. At the same time, a lot of them are struggling with how do we set up a team, what expertise do we need, what processes, what KPIs to leverage all that. So I think managing that complexity to turn it into an actual simplicity is something that's probably the biggest challenge for all of us, both individually as travelers and professionals.
Great. Yeah, complexity and simplifying it. Well, that is $1 million question if anybody has a single answer for that one. Thank you for setting the scene there, Eva. So, Ernesto, how are you seeing trends from the Amadeus perspective?
So, good afternoon. Well, good question to begin the panel. I would say that probably we need to take a look into two things. The first one would be technology, and the second one would be consumer behavior or traveler behavior. On the technology side, technology has been there for ages. I mean, it's nothing new to the travel industry. I would even say that disruption is not new to the travel industry. It has happened in the past. Maybe we didn't notice, okay? Things like online travel has been there for a decade now. E-ticketing has been there for a decade. Those things were disruptors. What is happening right now, and we will see that in the presentation a bit later, is that technology is evolving too fast, probably. So fast that it's difficult to foresee what's going to be the impact in the travel industry. And we are seeing a few things happening is that basically most of the travel providers are focusing on personalization of the travel, which is very important, and we will talk about that later. But that's leading to fragmentation. My colleague Julia was talking about that before in the previous presentation. There is more and more fragmentation. So at the end, the fragmentation is that we need more collaboration into all the different players in the travel industry in order to provide this seamless door-to-door experience. So for me, that's one of the biggest trends right now, the need for collaboration and integration of different services. And I would say the second one, also linking to what Eva was saying on the consumer behavior. The travelers are extremely savvy right now. They are so connected. They are accessing 24/7 to all the different services up to the point in which they cannot live without internet. So this is leading to something which is called the smart boredom, which is that the travelers are not bored as far as they are connected through a smartphone. And obviously, it's a big trend that is happening right now, and we have to reaccommodate all the offer in the travel industry around this.
Excellent. Well, that's a really great couple of opening points, and that's just the warm-up. So you're all welcome. Anybody new can come straight to the front. There's still some space here. So I'm going to kick off by giving the Digital Tourism Think Tank's perspective on current trends we're seeing right now in the visitor cycle. And the first thing I think, is we always have to remind ourselves that in everything we do, we have to put the visitor right at the heart of our strategy. So it's very tempting to get carried away with our own business goals, our own destination goals, building a brand or driving sales. But unless we do that with the visitor at the heart of our strategy, we're going to always fail in what we try to achieve. And this is really not a new principle, but it's more of a reminder. And it's something that in the digital space, UX and user experience and user-centered strategies is nothing new to being successful online. But we have to evolve this in our wider business principles and in our approach to creating experiences, for example. Always think about what are the visitor's needs and how do we put the visitor right at the heart of those of our strategy. And we see three big paradigm shifts right now happening in travel. So the first is that the visitor cycle as we know it no longer exists. It's still helpful and it's still useful as a strategic framework, but it simply isn't as simplified as it always has been. Secondly, we've got this always-on consumer connected all the time with many, many, many touch points across many devices. And having a relationship with that consumer is increasingly challenging, but at the same time, presents more and more opportunities. So that goes a bit to the complexity aspects of things. And the third is that technology is driving a completely new experience economy. And technology is not only changing how we distribute and sell travel in its entirety, but it's also disrupting and changing what travel looks like today. So if we zoom forward to augmented reality and think, okay, this is a technology which is developing fast, augmented reality is one single piece of technology is transforming how we experience travel in its very essence. So just think about those three different things. So let's start with the visitor cycle. And this is, well, everybody has their own interpretation of the visitor cycle. I think you might see a few in the next hour. This is, you know, in its most simple form, awareness through to sharing and affinity. And these principles still apply. But unfortunately, they just can't be segmented into very rigid segments as they used to be. There's much more cohesion between different aspects, and there's much more blurring of the lines. And different people are now playing in spaces that they never used to play in. And so we have to really kind of think about how it's evolved, but at the same time, keep that visitor cycle still guiding our strategy. Well, we know that social and mobile has created this infinite loop in travel. It means that the sharing and the in-trip part of travel is now one of the most important, from only a few years ago being probably for the online players one of the least important. We know that decisions, bookings, they happen in the moment, in an instant, and influences can be very fluid and changing all the time. So we have to be ready to engage people in that mobile environment and also in the moment and in real time. And that's quite a challenge for businesses which are not set up to do this. And further than that, you've got your sharing, which has been there for quite a while, but supporting and embracing this sharing of experiences is really, really key. And then you've got this mesh of complexity. So this is where you have 300, 400 even different touch points that consumers are typically now making before they make a decision. And we obviously can't be managing every single one of those small micro touch points. And that's really something that's quite difficult, especially if you're a small business, to manage that and to be across all those different places. But actually, what it really comes down to, from our perspective, is how you use the data that you have. Whether you're a tiny business or whether you're a global conglomerate, how do you use the data at your disposal to actually improve your customers' experience and build on that? I'm going to play a short snippet from one of the interviews that we've done on the Launchpad with a destination in Switzerland. And he talks about how they try to find utility in using their data. And they design everything around data. Oh, I skipped forward a little bit fast there.
We use the data that we can actually manage to use, because we have a lot of data, but we are starting to work with. So it's not that, which is actually, but we are actually working with KPIs. So we can tell you how many people are using the app, how many people were in mountains, how many people were buying whatever, using the slope, etc., etc. So this helps you to focus on the needs of the customer, okay, and to see new trends. But actually, as I said, the data that we're using and the data that we're collecting, there is a huge difference. So we are starting now to have this data strategy and to include this data strategy in the whole destination marketing. So actually the data that we are collecting now is, for example, which customer use which Wi-Fi point. Because now we have Wi-Fi everywhere. But for example, for us, in terms of investment, it's very important to know where is people connecting. So this kind of data is very important.
Okay, so I won't play all of that because we only have limited time. But in essence, what they've done is they've really worked on being a service provider for their visitors. And they've really supported the experience of visitors in the destination. And this in itself is what's driving such a good experience, a good reputation. And it's really driving people to the destination. So they're only able to do that by using data. And we've got to shift this thinking from being marketing-oriented to being more about the experience, but also thinking about how we can impact that. So we've got this blurred space right now between reality and virtual reality. And a lot of tech people will call this XR. So it's really a mixed reality world. But if we bring this into the destination environment, it brings us to ask questions about what is the focus of our strategy? What is RX? Is it developing experiences? Is it using data to improve the experiences? Is it how we manage the overall experiences and connecting everything? And is it innovation? So as you see here, marketing doesn't really come into it because it's all the rest that helps support and develop your brand and your identity and the interest that you drive for people. And ultimately, those decisions will always go back to how you put the visitor right at the heart of that strategy and how you deliver on the brand promise that all of your marketing communication says your destination is. So we built a framework. Unfortunately, not time for the whole thing today. But it's built on many different things. And it's really looking at the whole thing holistically. But today I'm just going to focus, before I hand over to the next speakers, on how to find brand match and what that's really about. And that's mixed with managing the experience and developing the services and all the other aspects of a destination. So what is a brand? Well, it's about carving out your identity and understanding what is unique about your identity and reinforcing it through the experience, through messaging, through all the different content channels you have, but also in the experiences you support and develop yourself. So whether you say you're a city of bicycles or you're a destination that is in harmony with nature, you need to be relentlessly driven on emphasizing and accentuating those strengths that you have and making sure that for your visitors you deliver on those promises and that they talk about those strengths as well. I'm going to end with a short clip from Singapore Tourism because we did a case study with them last year and they've just done a complete brand repositioning, which is absolutely brilliant. And I think this echoes a little bit what I'm saying, and it's a good note on which to end this first introductory presentation.
In this brand journey that we did for Brand Singapore, we recognize that, travelers are changing, their needs are evolving. A lot of them are going and wanting to understand what the destination offers, the authentic side of things. So for us, we also wanted to move beyond just describing the place and giving you checklists of things to do. We said that there's got to be more to it, really, because as a destination, we offer a multi-layered experience, right? So our shift is really from a transactional perspective to an attitudinal perspective, where we want to convey that attitude which Singapore stands for, and that's timeless. Over time, the places you visit may change, but that ethos, the fundamentals of what the destination stands for and how it drives the environment, the experience, will remain across.
Okay, so we summarize this down to 4 C's. If you've bought a diamond ring for your wife, you might know this. That should be 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. I wasn't paying attention there. Clarity, color, cut, and carrots. How clear is your message? How engaging is your content? How well-defined is your strategy? And what resources do you give to building that? And this is the last slide from me. We summarize this into a kind of a nice little diamond diagram, which at the very top, you've got your tone, how you speak to your audience, what your brand is about, your partners and how they reinforce that. Next, you've got your content, how you become storytellers all the time, how you engage people, down to distribution, inspiring people, engaging people, developing that interest, supporting, convincing, and delivering on that message, supporting the image, the promise, and the reality, and then you've got user experience and visitor experience, which is then supported by your data and how you design experiences, and then how you target them, and then ultimately how you convert them. This is just one kind of thinking around how we might think about all the different pillars which make up our visitor cycle and the strategy behind it. So that's my opening slides. I'm now going to hand over to Eva, who's going to give us the Google perspective. So Eva, please give Eva a very warm welcome to the stage as she talks you through Google's perspective.
Hello again. As Nick mentioned, I represent Google. I'm an industry manager for travel and tourism. I know that our job titles at Google can be confusing. People often reach out to me on LinkedIn thinking that I actually contract and book travel for Google employees. So they offer me discounts on flights and hotels, which is great. It's not what I do, however. What I do is that I work with some of the largest travel companies and tourism boards here in the region. I help them build their digital strategies and leverage Google's platforms to attract more travelers. Now, as you may know, Google has 7 platforms that have over 1 billion users each. So the question that we get asked most frequently by our clients is, what does the journey look like? How do people arrive at their decisions? What impacts their decisions to go to a particular destination? When did they decide? And these are all very, very legitimate questions because we build our planning, our creative assets, our measurement around these questions and the perceived funnel. And to Nick's point, this is how a lot of us did planning for a number of years. We were taught as marketeers to think of a linear funnel and to build our process around these stages. Now, because Google is very interested in user behavior, what we did last year is we spent 6 months analyzing thousands and thousands of actual customer journeys through a third-party opt-in panel. What we've learned was quite amazing. First of all, I can echo what Nick said. There is no funnel. It's not a funnel. It's a diamond, it's an hourglass, it's fireworks, it goes in all directions. Second of all, no 2 customer journeys are alike. Every user has its own way of arriving at the final decision. And what we thought was particularly interesting is that people go back and forth on the funnel all the time. So a person who may have started her journey researching hotels in Hawaii because she thought that's where she wanted to go, expanded her search at some point to all the beach destinations out there. So before you know it, Hawaii was competing with the Bahamas, with Dubai potentially, and every other place on earth that had a nice beach. She then narrowed down her search again to 2 destinations, and so on and so on. So this is to say it's more complicated than we like to think. The good thing, though, is we can address this new reimagined funnel. We do have to remember, though, that the travel research, as I said in the beginning, thanks to the number of options that we as travelers have, has become very broad and very complex. We're seeing on average at least 200 various digital interactions before a decision is made, sometimes even more. So that means, again, that instead of a traditional funnel, we have what we call a number of micro moments where people shape their opinions and decide where to go. We know that people get their information from a variety of sources, which again puts additional burden on marketeers to cover all of those sources. And we know that people use various tools to keep track of their progress and the information that they've learned throughout their research. To all this, all I can say is welcome to the age of assistance. This is a term that Google coined to say we live in a world where people are hyper-connected, where everyone has multiple devices, multiple apps, and as a result, people expect quick, relevant, and helpful experiences every step of the way. So age of assistance is the key concept that we work with and something that every marketeer should embrace. Part of this age of assistance trend also includes the fact that we see more than 60% of all queries now happening on mobile because it's there, because it's accessible. For a lot of marketeers, they're still struggling with what their presence and what their KPIs on mobile should be. We're also seeing that smartphones are becoming key to how people plan their trip, especially in MENA. We know that destination searches come from mobile. We know that smartphones are key in researching travel options. We see that they don't necessarily book as much on mobile, but it's still an important part of their experience and decision-making process. The fact that we live in a digitalized world also impacts the way that the users book their trips. So we're seeing now that the booking window is getting tighter and tighter. So people may have had a very lengthy research process, but the actual booking happens days or hours within a flight. We see that there is a growing interest in booking online, but still a significant portion of people booking offline, which presents a challenge for marketeers as to how do they measure, how do they connect their online marketing activity with what actually happens in store. We know that search is a huge discovery. Google search is a huge discovery and starting point for a lot of travelers. So when they think new destination, when they think vacation, Google search is typically the first place they go. And another interesting trend that we've observed that had an especially staggering growth in the recent years is the role of YouTube in choosing the destination. So travel videos have become massive and they're part of the decision-making process. We also see that people turn to their devices, their smartphones, for advice and decision where to go, much more than they do to their friends and family and their other sources. So what happened as a result of the age of assistance is that the users have developed three key traits: curiosity, being demanding, and being impatient. And I'll just briefly address each of these with a data point. Their curiosity is primarily reflected in the fact that 1 in 4 consumers shop for personal travel on a daily basis. This is very important because, again, going back to the questions that the clients ask, it's usually, when do people search? When do they decide? And our answer to that is every day, because they can. So I may check out a new hotel I've heard about, although I have no intention of booking right away. I may check flight prices for a trip that's 6 months from now just to see if they've changed. So travel research happens every day. There are certain peaks that we observe per market, but if you're thinking flighted short-term campaigns, that is not how people search for travel. Another important piece of information that we discovered is that only 9% of people have a brand in mind when they start their research. This is huge in terms of opportunity for travel brands, right? This means that everyone can compete in most situations. The playing field is simply bigger for everyone because there's less loyalty and people are more open to changing their mind if they come across something more interesting. The second trait, which is demanding, is 92% of users say that they would switch to another app or site if their needs are not met, which I think explains underperformance of a lot of applications that are launched, a lot of mobile sites we see out there. So no one is sticking around because you have a great brand or because they're meant to be loyal. If they're not assisted the way they expect to, they will go away. And finally, only 1 in 4 will continue to book if the user experience on the app or site is not good. So if it's slow, 3 out of 4 will leave. What does that mean for all of you today, especially if you're running a travel business? Basically, assistance is the new battleground for customers. We're seeing successful brands abandoning robust brand-first narratives. We're seeing them getting more and more granular, understanding what it is that they can do to help their audiences along the way. And this doesn't have to result in an immediate booking. Let me just be clear on that. It's about what can we do to be more assistive to our prospective customers that will really help brands grow. So, ensuring that your campaigns are tailored in a way that they account and enable for last-minute booking, for last-minute changes, rather than having a very strict, flighted schedule of things happening. For example, one thing we've discovered this year at Google with the Easter campaigns in Europe, because Easter was later, the booking window was extended. And a lot of our clients actually extended their original campaigns because we saw that there was still a lot of search volume, a lot of people who haven't made up their mind and booked their travel. So as a result, those clients who were flexible and able extended their campaigns to jump on the trend that we were observing at the time. Highlight the areas where you're competitive, where you're helpful. Highlight the things that you can do for your customers. Improve the technical performance of your assets. I have to say this sounds like common sense, but one of the things that we're constantly seeing with client tests is that the vast majority of assets we work with are underperforming on the technical front. And it's still a struggle for a lot of them, not understanding how much it impacts performance. And finally, make sure you have enough granular messaging to capture the true traveler intent, to capture the actual micro moment that they're in, and not some perceived high-level stage of the funnel. These 4 things combined should get you, hopefully, a more successful travel business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva. Let's give Eva a round of applause. And I'm going to keep moving so we stay on track with time, and we'll come to discussion at the end. So Ernesto, the floor is yours. Let's hear the Amadeus perspective.
So good afternoon to all of you. So my name is Ernesto Sanchez, and today I've been asked by Nick to talk about perspective of consumer purchase and booking trends, which is quite an interesting topic. And there are many things happening in this area. So we wanted to share with you our views of this. The first one I think is quite obvious. We were talking about that in the beginning. It's technology. Okay? Technology is changing everything. It's nothing new, as I was saying before. I mean, technology has been there for ages. What is new is the speed of that technology. And also on top of that, what is new is that there are so many things that can be impacting the travel industry in the short term that it's really difficult to focus on one of them. And I decided to picture just 9 of them there. And we know for sure, because it's already happening today, that many of them are already disrupting the industry. Some others may or may not, okay? The case of mobile has been already covered by Eva as well, okay? So obviously, as of today, there are 4.3 million people using the mobile phone. And this is accelerating with the new generations. Artificial intelligence. There are billions of dollars spent in a yearly basis by big giants in IT on artificial intelligence, and we are seeing more and more things coming in the travel industry that will probably reshape the whole industry. Virtual and augmented reality. That's something that is already happening. The same way that in the past, whenever you want to buy a car, you want to try the car. Now in the future and today, if you want to go to a destination, why don't you try that destination first? Why don't you use the augmented reality, okay, and virtual reality in order to get immersed into that destination, trying to take a look into a hotel or a plane or some other things before you buy that product, which is essential. Cloud technology, most of the companies worldwide are uploading all the data. Obviously, this is very well related to increases in the security, which is already happening. The Internet of Things, we have, as of today, billions of devices, but in the near future, we will have trillions of devices, all of them connected to Internet, all of them talking to each other and reshaping the whole experience of traveling. Also related to this, advanced robotics, biometric technology. More and more companies are using biometric, replacing their passwords for biometrics, which is obviously increasing security as well. 3D printing, in the case of Dubai, for example, they are ahead of other cities in the world using 3D printing. And last but not least, blockchain. So as you can see, we have so many things impacting in the short term that it's difficult to see as of today what is going really to reshape the travel industry or not. But let's take a look also into the travelers. Okay? The travelers are not something static. The travelers are evolving, and the travelers are becoming more and more savvy, more demanding, more connected. Actually, even in Amadeus, whenever we commission studies, we don't take a look any longer into the demographics. Now we take a look into the psychology of the traveler, which is far more important, okay? About how the traveler behaves, rather than if the traveler has this age or belongs to a social or economic level, okay? This is far more interesting. In the case of the travelers, basically they want it all, okay? They are becoming some kind of, I don't want to use the word spoiled, but obviously they are paying for things. When I pay for things, I want the service, I want the return, you know? And now I'm connected 24 hours. So I use my mobile. I use social media. In the case of mobile, we have already seen, for example, that 80% of the people plan something related to their trips on their mobile phones. And we expect next year that 50 of the sales on the travel industry worldwide will go through mobiles, no longer through desktops or any other platforms, okay? So mobile is not the future, it's today. Personalization, super important. So me, as a traveler, I don't want to be treated the same way as others. I have different needs than the rest of the people, correct? So I want a service which is personalized, which is customized, tailored to my needs, and completely different than others. Service, digital control, and what we were referring as before as well, the total trip experience. This is key. More and more travelers want a seamless flow in the trip, door to door, from the beginning till the end. Because what's happening right now is a verticalization of all the different services rather than a horizontalization. Okay? So it's very difficult to see the connections of having a seamless experience and to have a one-stop shop that can offer everything. So all these things the travelers want, which I think is quite logical, okay? Because they pay for that. So let's take a look to the travel experience now as a king. So what the travel providers need to provide to make sure that they address the needs of the travelers. Well, first of all, they have to know their audience. I was talking about that before. Okay? So each traveler is different. Each traveler is unique. Each traveler needs to be treated in a completely different way in all the different stages of the traveler. In the inspiration, in the booking, in the searching, whenever they go to the airport, whenever they are traveling, whenever they are in the destination. So these need to be taken into consideration, knowing the audience, knowing the needs of the different travelers, owning the brand, super important. The brand loyalty is gold, really. And this is what most of the different travel providers are aiming to. Building loyalty is super important, but it's very difficult as well, because there are many offerings out there that all the different travel providers have to focus precisely on that, on own the brand, so that they can build the brand loyalty. Leverage on user-generated content. So the content is no longer coming just from the travel providers. Now it's coming from the travelers. The travelers are providing ratings on their services, on the flights, on the hotels, on anything. And that's content that is being generated by the travelers, and the travel providers have to take advantage of that. Okay, they have to leverage on that to improve their services and to provide new things. And obviously, super important, that omni-channel experience, which is so critical to the success. It's no longer about I'm using just one device, like my laptop or my desktop, in order to do a booking and to do the whole thing. No, I switch between different devices, okay? Online and offline in many of the cases. And I need to make sure that everything is really well connected. So, the travel cycle, okay? Which is super important. And has evolved dramatically. You remember like 10, 20 years ago, whenever we were traveling, even before the online, the sunrise of the online travel agencies, it was very simple. You were just going to a travel agency, you were booking, you were doing the booking, you were going to the airport, you were flying, you had your experience, and then you go back home. Now, everything has changed, and there are multiple opportunities out there. Really, tons of opportunities for different providers. The first one, very important, inspiration. Probably you will be quite surprised to hear that the millennials and Generation Z, two-thirds of them, 66% of them, whenever they are traveling, they don't have any destination in mind. They just want to travel. They just want to have that experience of traveling. So they are very prone to be inspired. Okay? They can be easily influenced, and we can talk about that later. After that, of course, we have the shopping experience. So you are inspired, you go for the searching and the shopping, you do the booking, okay? And after the booking, there is a window opportunity of around 24 hours or 48 hours in which the traveler is super excited. So I'm going to travel on a business trip or on a leisure trip, but I'm going out of home. So that window is a potential opportunity for cross-selling and upselling, and a very important one, and needs to be all travelers needs to be approached by different travel providers who want to take advantage of that in order to increase their revenues. Also, another window opportunity, quite important, 24 hours or 48 hours before the departure. Again, the excitement comes back, okay? So I'm leaving, I'm going to leave. There are many things that I want before I'm traveling. Then, on the way to the airport, whenever I'm getting close to take my flight, at the airport itself, and here Internet of Things and many other technologies are providing a new seamless experience with potential upselling and cross-selling opportunities. On trip, obviously connected 24/7, and post trip. So as you can see, and you can see that by the icons that we have around the cycle, there are so many opportunities. I mean, this disruption that is coming thanks to the technology and the changes in the customer behavior, rather than a threat in the industry, is more an opportunity for many players that need to be taking advantage of that. Now, let's go to the online area. We just had a press conference in which we unveiled the results of a white paper that we commissioned to Focusrite, in which we were taking a look to the online bookings or online travel agencies in Middle East and Northern Africa. Quite interesting to see that, unfortunately, Middle East and Northern Africa is still lagging behind most of the regions in the world in terms of online bookings adoption. Only 33%, as you can see there, in 2018. But the good news is that we expect in just 3 years' time that to grow up to 44%. So Middle East and Northern Africa is well positioned to be the second fastest growing region in the world after China in terms of online growth in just 3 years' time. Now you can think about all the opportunities which are out there for all the different online players. Another good news as well. We are foreseeing a growth in online, but we also foresee a growth in offline. So that means that the growth in the online bookings is not going to cannibalize the growth in offline. So both of them are set to grow in the short term. So what we are doing in Amadeus to make these opportunities a reality, because the future is now. So You can see that summarized in this chart, which at the end is like a virtuous circle, or is a virtuous square, right? So the travelers, as we were saying before, have now different demands. So new players, new rules, new services, they are more and more demanding. In Amadeus, we have a good expertise. We are providing technology. We are the leading IT provider for the travel industry. And obviously, we are able to provide those personalized offers to all the different players that you can see there, okay? That provide different solutions that serve the travelers. And we call this the live travel space, okay? Which is an open, dynamic, and connected environment in which we have Amadeus Travel Platform at the core. And what we are doing, what we are aiming with this is becoming the Netflix of travel. And you will be asking yourselves, how the hell Amadeus is going to become the Netflix of travel? Well, it's very simple. What we are doing is we are providing a platform in which we will have all the different providers connected, even the users that can generate content that can be offered through any of the different channels over there. As you can see, any content, any source, through any channel. So this is our vision of the future. I think that we have many opportunities ahead, probably more opportunities than ever before, and we invite you to collaborate with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for those interventions. We're going to go to the discussion part of today's panel today. So if you have any questions, I'll come to you in one moment, but I first of all just want to ask you both this, first of all, this question: can we still rely on that traditional visitor cycle as a basis for our planning, our strategies, and how we think as brands? I will put that question to you first of all, Eva.
So I think we talked a lot about the funnel. I think fundamentally the stages are still there. People still need to mature from, I know nothing about this place, to I really want to go there and I'm booking my flight. The thing is, it doesn't happen in a neat, linear way, as I mentioned. So yes, we do have to account for people who are in different stages and different mindsets of planning. We just cannot assume that they will nicely progress from one to the other within a month or however long our campaign is. So being able to capture those micro moments and being able to capture the intent that they're showing with a particular search, with a particular search query, with a particular app use, that is the key to mastering the new funnel.
Great, you can keep the mic. So yeah, and you talked about different behavioral patterns. Many consumers just looking and then not going back to that for maybe 6 months, a year, or perhaps not at all. Others looking at one destination and then suddenly evolving into a much broader search. So this is certainly a huge challenge to know how to try and pull that customer in and build that relationship, because the funnel, in that sense of pushing them down it, just isn't quite as easy, I guess, in that sense.
It is, but thankfully we have a lot of technology, and I speak specifically of Google now. We do have a lot of targeting and advertising technology today that enables us to recognize the stage of the research and the state of mind that the user is in. So the resources are there for advertisers to capture the real intent. But going back to the original point from my intro, companies need to have expertise and processes in place to be able to capture the insights that the technology gives them.
Yeah, so everybody needs to have analytics and data as, if not a department, at least a person. So how does this, this traditional visitor cycle look for Amadeus? You've actually did show us at the end there still something which we can all relate to, but the detail at those different stages is changing. So do you think we can still depend on those different stages of travel and plan with that in mind?
Absolutely. Actually, I think that the evolution is a constructive evolution. It's not a destructive evolution. So the disruption is not up to a point that whatever was in the past is no longer valid. It's still valid. The thing is that there are some things which are evolving on top of. One of the key things that we have, one of the key problems I think that we have in the travel industry is that we have too much data and we don't know what to do with it. And it's a bit of bittersweet as well, because it's one of the few industries in the world that have a massive amount of data. I mean, we have trillions and trillions of data out there on the travelers, on behaviors, etc. And we are still failing in something, which refers to what you were saying before, Nick, on this circle, is that not only how we analyze the consumer behavior, but how we can try to predict and to anticipate what will happen, so that at the end all the different players are connected and they collaborate all together, but we can anticipate the needs of the travelers, not only serving them, but anticipating what they might need. I think that's one of the keys for the evolution on the travel industry in the short term.
So I think very much echoes what you're saying about the importance of understanding the data you have, even if that's very minimal and simple data. Get a real grasp of it and build something based on that. So I want to sort of go into this question of omni-channel, but at the same time picking up, Eva, on how you ended your presentation by talking about the age of assistance. And I think it's a really great point that you made there about needing to support our visitors, our travelers, our customers in a very, very different way to how we've always perceived kind of brand building. Do you see assistance as something which is about the brand? I'm thinking that on the one hand, we perhaps support our customers with good content, which informs them, and at the very other end of the scale, maybe that's in voice and making something easier.
Absolutely. We see, as I mentioned, that a lot of brands are still thinking brand first. They're thinking about the message that they want to convey rather than thinking what the user is interested to hear. I think there's a lot of pressure as well on companies to sell, and they think that unless they have a direct sales message, the sales isn't happening, which is not the case. So sometimes you really need to take step back to take a step forward, actually, and think about if that person in that moment is just interested in understanding what the difference is between staying in JBR and staying in downtown, then let's give them that information. Or if that person is interested in the most awarded restaurants in Dubai, let's try to give them that. Or if they're trying to book transportation. So rather than thinking, this is my direct sales message, how do I get it out there? Let's think about how do we connect with the user where and when it makes sense for them. Because again, you're not the only one competing there. There's hundreds of brands who've thought about sending their direct sales message.
I think that's a really good point. And what I certainly see is that sometimes you have people who don't understand the difference between building a brand through all of the tools you have and delivering a very sales-oriented message. And I guess your advice would be to support the development of that interest through content, especially at the earlier stages, but to build sort of more commercially price-focused messaging in between that. Is that a kind of the right strategy?
I think it's about serving the right content to the right people. So yes, if I'm interested in knowing exactly how much a trip to Dubai will cost or how much it costs to go to the top of Burj Khalifa, then please give me that information directly. So there is a time and place for sales-oriented messages, which ironically brands often fail to do. Sometimes when the user is searching for very direct sales-oriented information, they serve a long, irrelevant narrative. and vice versa. So again, it's about understanding the micro moment. It's about understanding intent, which is why a lot of what we do is around understanding intent and then having the right kind of content to address that specific query.
Now, at Amadeus, you obviously, I think you're in such a privileged position to have just so much data at your disposal, such a deep understanding of consumer behavior all the way through to booking patterns and even availability. How do you see this omni-channel environment playing out for the brands that you work with? Is this something that they find increasingly complex, or do they actually find that connecting the right data, they can actually be really more successful than perhaps they were
So
before?
you mean basically sales distribution, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What we are seeing right now is fundamental changes in the distribution that will have fundamental changes as well in the industry probably in the mid-long term. Amadeus, obviously we are providing indirect distribution for most of the players. Now we see more and more initiatives coming, especially from IATA, on the NDC, new distribution capabilities. They are pushing all the different providers to have direct distribution because they want to take full control of the offer. So, but at the end, the expectations are in the short term are that just around 21 airlines which are in the board of the NDC are expected to have like a 20% of their bookings by 2020, something similar. That represents 4% of the bookings worldwide, which means still at the end, what we foresee is that there will be like a convergence of the direct distribution channel with the indirect distribution channel. And we are basically, NDC is one of the drivers of that, and will facilitate that.
Okay, great. I'm going to open up to questions from the audience because we have just a few minutes left. So who would like to ask this great panel a question? Do feel free to raise your hand. Wow, they are shyer than last year, I have to say. Maybe somebody at the front? Oh, we have somebody at the front. There we go.
Hi. So, great data points from the whole journey of a customer. Do you see that if a repeat customer has different data points, do they go through the same cycle but just differently, and therefore you study that and you advertise and spend money, on a reverse cycle maybe because this guy's been with us once and now I think he's going to travel differently. Do you predict that at all?
So thanks for the question. Thanks for saving the day. Actually, it's very interesting. In some instances, we see repeat customers behaving like a completely new customer. I guess it depends on the category and the product, but if you think about it, if you've bought a computer from Apple, you're a customer, but then you may not be interested in them at all for 2 or 3 years because you're not in market to purchase, right? And so 2-3 years later, when you are in market, you start researching from scratch because you may or may not be aware of what's out there in terms of products, reviews, etc. So technically, any type of customer, in our experience, can go through any kind of customer cycle, especially if you're adding new products, if it's a long purchase cycle, etc. So just cater to the individual and what they need in the moment rather than labeling them a certain way.
So then you remarketing to the same customer, thinking that he'll come back, now take his family to another Disneyland in another part of the world, would not be a good strategy then?
Well, remarketing is very effective for a lot of customers. Again, understanding what the message is at a given time. So if someone's visited Dubai's website a month ago on a particular campaign, what do we serve that customer a month later? Have they traveled? Have they not? What do we think happened there? So again, remarketing can be very, very effective, understanding what it is that we remarket with and why.
Good question. Do you want to jump in on that?
Well, I just would say that each trip is a unique experience, irrespective if that trip is being done several times under similar circumstances. But each trip can be treated as unique and different, and each trip, many different things might happen even if it's the same trip, okay? Even when you go to your office every day, probably every day small things change, okay? And probably you are more prone or inclined to do different things with the time, even if it's the same person doing the same thing every day. So I would say that yes, remarketing is something I think that adds value, is valuable, and depends on the different circumstances and macro environment.
I think it's a great question. It's a really good point to end on. And I think actually what you kind of touch on is, can we use research and can we build profiles and understand our customers in the traditional sense anymore? Or perhaps should we give everything to automation, AI, to fully calculate every single interaction, every single development of that interest right through to booking and the experience cycle. So to what extent should we use perhaps our creativity as humans, mankind, versus our sort of the data and the more calculation-driven approach, which allows us to auto-target. So I guess we'll leave that as an open idea. But where do we, where does one stop and the other start? It's a really good point to end on. So I'd like to give my panel a big thank you. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you for joining. And they will be here for a few minutes after the session to answer any questions you have. We'll be back tomorrow with a session on content and storytelling and experiential travel. So I hope you join us in the afternoon tomorrow for that. And I'm going to play this out with a short clip telling you all about Campus. Campus is our next event happening in June in Oslo. And it's for destinations. And it's a very unique event because it gets hands-on and in-depth exploring all of these different trends in a workshop environment. So I really hope you guys join us there. It's a funky little clip because we took it from our social channels. So I hope you enjoy. That's very short. I actually have another video for you, so I will play that. It gives you a little bit more of an idea. We're all still here, so there we go. There you go. That's a little bit more of an idea. We have a lot more content on our site, but that's where we have to engage you at a deeper level. So join us tomorrow. Thank you very much to our panel. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you.